Hi, I'm Truman with Park Tool. In this video, we'll go over how to remove and install press-fit bottom brackets. This video will not deal with thread-together bottom brackets. These bottom brackets also install into non-threaded shells, but they are installed and removed using tool fittings on either cup. If you think you have a thread-together style bottom bracket, or you're not sure what you have, take a look at our other bottom bracket videos. The bottom bracket world can be confusing because there are a lot of different standards and even different names for the same standard. This can make it difficult to understand what parts you may need. For more information on bottom bracket standards and terminology, see this text article at parktool.com. In a press-fit bottom bracket shell, there are no internal threads. The bore is slightly smaller in diameter than the bottom bracket cups that hold the bearings. This creates an interference fit, also known as a press fit. The bottom bracket is then held in by the pressure created by the interference. This differs from a threaded bottom bracket in that the threaded bottom bracket relies on the tension of the threads to create the friction needed to hold it in place under load. It is important to note that not all press-fit style bottom brackets are designed to be reinstalled once they are removed. The way some bottom bracket cups are designed, the removal tool must be seated against the bearing. Striking the tool can then cause deformations to the cup and the bearing system, which can negatively affect the performance of the bottom bracket system. On some models, you'll need to install a new one after removing the old one. Press-fit bottom brackets come in a wide variety of dimensions for compatibility with different shell widths, shell diameters, crank spindle widths, and spindle diameters. When sourcing replacement parts, it's important to know these dimensions and choose a compatible bottom bracket, whether you're reusing your original crank or upgrading to a new one. Contact your manufacturer for more information. Now let's get into some bottom bracket removal and installation procedures. For removal, you will need a bearing extractor tool, such as the Park Tool BBT 30.4, BBT 90.3, or RT1. You will also need a hammer to drive the tool. For installation, you will need a suitable bottom bracket press such as the Park Tool BBP 1.2 or HHP3. You will also need to use one of the following for surface prep: retaining compound, anti-seize compound, or grease. The first step to bottom bracket removal is to remove the crankset. For a little assistance in that, see this playlist for the specific instructions for your model of crank. Be sure to remove any bottom bracket adapters you find, such as these. Try first to simply remove them by hand. If that's not possible, you'll need to use the BBT 90.3, which we'll talk about in more detail later in this video. First, measure the inner diameter of the bottom bracket bearing or the outer diameter of the spindle. This bike uses a bearing with a 30mm inside diameter. There are two tool choices for removal: the BBT 30.4 and the RT1. The BBT 30.4 set includes a set of drifts for installing the new bottom bracket. These ensure the bearing cups are centered in the shell as they are pressed in. The removal tool includes a centering guide to center the driver in the bottom bracket, as well as a stepped foot to center itself in the bearings. However, some bottom brackets use a very narrow protective dust sleeve and will only accept the RT1 and not the BBT 30.4. If you are working on a BB30 system, you may find C-clips inside the shell. Inspect that the foot is not striking on the ears of this clip. With the BBT 30.4, guide the head into the bottom bracket shell. Push the stepped guide up against the bearing until it's seated inside the bearing. Feel inside and verify that the head is seated properly against the bearing. It can be helpful to get assistance from another person to brace the bike as you strike the tool. This allows more force from the impact to go into the cup removal and less into flexing the frame. Strike the tool squarely and confidently. Reverse the tool and push the guide up to the frame to center the tool. Strike the tool as before to remove the second side. If the bottom bracket bearing inside diameter is between 22 and 24 millimeters, the BBT 90.3 is an effective tool. Before installing the tool, inspect inside the bottom bracket shell. Check for a dust sleeve between the bottom bracket cups. If there is no dust sleeve, you will need to take extra care when installing the tool in order to avoid damaging the frame or other internal parts, such as cables. Pull the tool through the drive side and engage it behind the cup. Feel inside and verify that the tool is centered in the shell and that the fingers of the tool are engaged only on the back side of the cup. If the tool is misaligned, it can cause damage to the frame or cups. Strike the tool squarely and confidently. After a few impacts, stop and verify that the cup is moving and the tool is still properly positioned. Repeat the process on the other side. The Trek BB90 and BB95 standards have a unique design that requires additional considerations during removal. Especially with the drive side bearing, there is very little contact with the removal tool. Begin by removing the non-drive side bearing. It is often necessary to insert a plug to act as a wedge that will keep the fingers pressed tight to the bearing. For example, a 15 to 17 millimeter socket works well for this. Strike the tool to remove one side. Reverse the tool into the other bearing and insert the socket. Remove the second side. Inside the shell is a sleeve. This is the sleeve that prevents removal tools from opening to contact the bearing. The BBT 90.3 can also be used to remove adapters stuck inside larger bearings. Treat these as if they were bearings. Now measure the bearing to determine the appropriate tool for the bearing removal. For systems using spindles larger than 24 millimeters, such as SRAM Dub and Campy Ultra Torque cups, use the RT1. Compress the RT1 fingers and install the tool through the drive side until it is seated against the back of the non-drive side bearing. The bottom bracket can now be removed. Again, strike the tool, checking that the cup is moving and the tool fingers are contacting the back of the cup. Repeat on the opposite side. It can also occur that the tool removes the bearing, but the cup remains in the shell. If this happens, you can try tapping on the inner sleeve with a punch or race removal tool.
When installing a press-fed bottom bracket, the most important thing to remember is to properly prepare the bottom bracket and the shell. We do this for several reasons. Surface prep will help prevent corrosion and aid in future removal. It can also prevent noise and unnecessary wear. We'll start with cleaning the shell and the bottom bracket cups with a clean rag and some alcohol. Now, there are a few options for surface prep. The most basic option is standard grease. Although other compounds may be preferable, grease fills an important function, acting as a barrier between components and damping potential noise. Anti-seize compound provides a long-term barrier that is more durable than grease. It can also fill gaps in press-fit applications. A little bit goes a long ways. Retaining compound hardens and expands once applied, creating a barrier and filling any gaps while providing pressure. When using a retaining compound, it is highly recommended to first apply adhesive primer to all the surfaces and then allow it to dry. Adhesive primer speeds activation of the retaining compound and helps prevent permanent bonding. After about 5 to 10 minutes, the primer will be dry enough for you to apply the retaining compound. Depending on your bike's component design and materials, some of these options may be better than others. Contact your bike manufacturer with any questions regarding surface prep. Whatever surface prep option you choose, apply a thin layer to each side of the bottom bracket shell. Over-application could result in excess compound outside the cups, which may attract dirt and other contaminants. Now that the surfaces are prepped, the bottom bracket can be pressed into the shell. For this, the Park Tool HHP 3 or BBP 1.2 will be needed. If you are pressing without the aid of drifts, press only 1 cup at a time. Place 1 cup onto the press. Install the press through the shell. Use the plate of the press against the frame. As you begin the pressing process, it is imperative that the bearing cups are centered in the bottom bracket shell. Be sure to center the bearing cups on the tool as you begin the pressing procedure. Press until you see the flange of the bottom bracket contact the frame. When fully seated, you should feel the press bottom out. Do not try pressing any further. Remove the tool and engage it on the second bearing. Again, center the shaft and carefully press in the second bearing. If your press tool has bottom bracket drifts, select the appropriate one and install. Place the cup against the drift. Pass the press through the bottom bracket shell and install the opposite cup and then the drift on the other side of the tool. Install the opposite side of the press. Start the pressing procedure. Use smooth, even turns to activate the press. Go slow and take time to make sure the cups are pressing in evenly on both sides of the bottom bracket shell. Press until you see the flanges of the bottom bracket contact the frame. When fully seated, you should feel the press bottom out. Do not try pressing any further. Remove the press from the bottom bracket. On the Trek BB90 or BB95 standard, as well as the BB30 system, the bearings are slightly recessed inboard of the bottom bracket shell, requiring additional consideration. First, install any dust sleeves if applicable. This process is best done with bearing drifts, which are included in the BBP 1.2 bearing press. If you lack the correct drift, press in 1 bearing at a time. You can use an old bearing as a drift to push the new bearing fully into position. Keep the old bearing aligned with the new bearing.
Thanks for watching. You can find hundreds more videos like this one on our channel here on YouTube. And we're constantly working on more. So be sure to subscribe for the latest content from Park Tool. And check out our website, which has even more content to help you make your bike better.